was such beauty in the two becoming one. An intimate portrayal of the Father's endless love. But nothing could reverse the evil damage done. When the thief destroyed and killed and stole what we dreamed of, and in this amputation of my very heart, I'm left with devastation and a loneliness that's harder than I think I can bear. 'Cause I'm here without you, and I have no words to say just how I feel. I would never have imagined life would turn out quite this way, and I'm struggling to believe that this is real.
Hello, my name is Howard Joslin. I grew up in a small town named Minburn in central Iowa on my grandpa's farm. And during my senior year of high school, I became aware that I was not good enough to work my way to heaven, so I placed my faith in Jesus Christ. Not long after that, I went to college at Iowa State University, and after the sophomore year of college, had an opportunity to go to Japan and China on a summer mission project. And I remember praying on the Great Wall of China while I was there, that God would one day bring me back to this place, to that place, so that I could preach the gospel in China. Life tends to happen, doesn't always turn out the way we wanted, and so 10, 15 years later, I was still working as an accountant and not involved in world missions. My wife Ann and I had a random business trip to Dallas in 1997. And at that point, we decided that we would migrate our family to Texas, bring our 4 kids, and attend seminary. We were full of hope at what God would do through this time in Dallas in seminary. I graduated finally in 2006, just before they kicked me out for taking too long. And the very next day, I had a heart attack after our celebratory party. At the same time, my wife Ann was feeling sick, and got full after eating just a little bit of food. So we went to various doctors and had numerous tests. And in July that year, July 2006, we learned that my wife Ann had very rare and aggressive cancer. It was called angiosarcoma. So we began to go to MD Anderson for cancer treatments, and prayed that God would physically heal Ann in this life. And 2 years later to the day from her very first cancer appointment, Ann died. And there's several words that describe what grief does to a person. Devastation is one, because everything about our life was devastated by Ann's death. Another one is robbery, because all that we had hoped for and all that we wanted to do was stolen from us by death.
Soon the crash and burn gave way to darkest grief. If only I had known that light was slowly drawing near.
One of the ways I was able to minister during Ann's cancer and death was send out email updates to friends and family. If God was allowing me to go through these trials, that I ought to be able to use my seminary education and try to encourage and teach others through my trials. So I compiled those emails a few years after Ann died and turned them into a book called Honest Wrestling. Publishing is a difficult experience. I opted to go with a self-publisher, a well-known Christian self-publisher, because I wanted to get the book out there, and I knew that as soon as it was out there, it would become a bestseller. Unfortunately, about a year later, I'd still only sold a few books, mostly to family and friends. And I was driving through New Mexico with my daughter Hannah, taking her back to college at Colorado Christian University. And she was asleep, and I was daydreaming and kind of praying and asking the Lord, how can I get more sales for my book? And one thing that came to mind was the best way to get more sales is to have more books. Yet I was a full-time consultant with 7 kids and just no time to pour into writing quickly. So I thought, well, you know, I have an excellent thesis and I have some very good exegetical papers from seminary that I could publish, turn into ebooks, and maybe those would be helpful for pastors overseas that have no commentaries in their own language. Then I thought, as I thought about that, I thought of my friend Tom Golding from Australia, who got a PhD when I was getting my master's. And I know he has excellent materials, his dissertation, his thesis, various papers, that again could become valuable resources for pastors overseas that don't have books. So somewhere there in the middle of New Mexico in January 2013 is when the idea for Authenticity Bookhouse was formed.
Good morning, I'm Fran Geiger Joslin. In the same decade that man first landed on the moon, I was literally born, by contrast, into the Stone Age. I grew up as a missionary kid in Irian Jaya, Indonesia, which is now called Papua. I basically grew up knowing I would be a missionary, never questioned that. I just spent my life planning to be a missionary. It was actually while we were on our way home for good to the U.S. when I was almost 12 that the Lord actually put a book into my hand. It was called Not My Will. That book pretty much changed my life spiritually, turned me around. Not that I wasn't walking with the Lord, but really solidified my faith, no matter what God had for me, that I wanted to walk with Him. At the same time, He brought a man into my life named Brian Geiger. Brian had no plans to go into missions, and I had just said, no, we will be friends, because I was going to the mission field and he wasn't. Brian applied to seminary, took a few classes. I had some health issues and ended up pregnant. And our first child was born with a heart condition. Our second child was born with asthma. And it just seemed like the Lord continued to shut the doors. We continued to pursue missions, but the Lord continued to shut the doors on our plans. I finally looked at Brian one day and I said, you know, if we could be involved in at least supporting missionaries, maybe I would be satisfied. Not sure why that's making me emotional, but so anyway, he decided to go into business and took a job. We struggled a lot for a while financially, and then the Lord gave him a good job. We were able to sell the house that I felt like was causing more health issues for the children. We moved into a nice brand new house. We were decorating. We just thought, you know, everything was going to be great. Before the year was out, Brian began having symptoms. We found out later they were seizures, and he was diagnosed with brain cancer. He died in July of 2008. Nothing can describe what it's like to lose your best friend and to have to single parent the children that are left alone as orphans. I think the only thing that got me through was the knowledge that God was in control and that God was going to get me through this. In the process of my grief, the name of this book came back to my mind, Not My Will. I hadn't actually thought of the book in a number of years, but I just had this deep feeling that I needed to find this book. And it was actually written in the 1800s, I think, and I thought I'll never find that book. And then the thought came to me that Amazon sells a lot of books. So I went to Amazon and I found the book and I ordered it. And I sat in my bed one day. I took the children to school and I got back in bed and I sat there and I read that book. It dawned on me that day that the Lord placed that book in my hand 35 years ago to prepare me for where I was today. And I thought, wow, what a big God. It's amazing how in the midst of devastation and grief, you can see God's goodness. But I just thought, what an amazing God we serve, that He could place a book in my hand 35 years before I needed it. That became the sort of the backdrop of what my ministry then began to be, was to share with people that God is big, even though life isn't always what we plan it to be.
One of the things I tried to do when I wrote my email updates and then when I wrote the book Honest Wrestling was to share from my heart the struggles I was going through, to take off the mask and to let people know what I was really going through, and not use cliches, but to let people into my pain and struggle and doubts.
That's basically the reason why we chose the word authenticity for Authenticity Book House. Our heart is to minister to others by telling the truth, by being honest, by sharing that God is still good even in the midst of trouble. And so as we move forward in our new ministry, we want to accept books that really deal with people's pain and the honesty of that pain as they move forward in walking with the Lord.
Authenticity Book House is committed to equipping pastors and teachers and missionaries and providing them with biblical resources in their own languages so they can better comprehend what they're studying and be better equipped in their ministries. And our goal is to provide them resources by serving authors and helping them become published authors, and hiring local believers that are skilled in translation, editing, book formatting, and social media. So we're thankful that you're here today. We're excited and emotional about what God is doing, and we trust that in some way you can participate and help us in this ministry.